Let's talk about the Islanders. And John, um, do you hear that? Hold on. Oh, okay, right. That's what we're hearing out of the front office. Nothing right
Oh, I heard
now.
mourning doves here, but maybe you can't
Yeah,
hear
no,
that.
I heard nothing here, right? My daughter's asleep. My wife's inside. I don't think she has the TV on. Sometimes she likes her moments of silence. And that's what we have over here, at least on my end silence, radio silence, nothing. I don't hear a goddamn thing. No one's hearing a goddamn thing. What does this mean? Why don't we know anything, or why haven't we heard anything from Lou Lamoriello or Lane Lambert post breakup day?
I think there's two sides to how we can do this. The first one is not fun, and it's a very short answer. It means nothing. As we've learned, silence doesn't mean anything. There are some things we can glean as we have over the last two seasons of and we'll get to maybe who's coming back and UFAs are RFAs, and we kind of touched on that last week. I don't think there'll be any surprises, which is exactly my point. I don't think there are going to be surprises to an extent. Um, we're waiting to see when or if shoes drop, and the fun part is going to be speculating, right? So I think there's a part of us that the past has proven this doesn't mean a whole lot. Um, Even if reports leak out, thinking about last summer, the silence didn't ultimately led to nothing. It doesn't mean that nothing was happening, but skip ahead to the end, nothing happened, right? So not hearing anything minus the hubbub in the middle, um, it didn't lead to anything. I think it's fair to speculate because there isn't anything, and we've talked about this before, where it's not the power Lamorel thinks it is. It's not that power grab that he thinks it is because it gets away from him, right? And then he snaps back at reporters, don't, whatever that wasn't cleanup day. Maybe it was in the playoffs. Maybe it was right before the playoffs. Don't report on things, report on what you know. And it's like, hey, dude, you have the ability to actually say something or say, hey, we're working on things. You'll know when we're ready to tell you. And that would at least say, okay, things are happening. And we believe him to whatever extent we want to believe him. He has the power to do that. He's very much choosing not to do that. He's well within his right not to do that. But it's not going to stop anybody, especially people who have, you know, we're not media, we're a podcast. Um, well, you're media, just not with the Antlers. But and even then, it's a very differently run team. What people think reporters do, I'm not really sure. Um, Either way, I don't think it means anything. I think in short, um, again, we're free to speculate, but I don't. I mean, do you think are you getting anything from that? I don't know what could that could possibly be, and because there's a lot of hard decisions, and that takes time, or potentially hard
Yeah.
decisions, right? We may be thinking, oh, it's Lane, or ownership is telling Lamorello to stop because they're not sure about Lamorello or Lane. I mean, it just depends on what perspective you're looking at. Is it Lamorello at this point being silent, or is it ownership telling him, "All right, we gotta address some stuff. We're gonna take our time. We have the time. The draft isn't for a while. Um, this and that. There's no rush."
No, I mean, I guess there's no rush, but the fact of the matter is that there's a contract that needs to be hammered out for Lamorello if he's staying. Um,
And that may
you know,
be part of it.
that may be part of it, right? So I don't
He can't do
really,
anything until he's re-upped. I mean, it depends on when his contract expires. It could have
yeah,
been they may not have been a date. It could have been a week after locker cleanout. So he may just be in limbo
right,
at this point.
right. Yeah, so it's an interesting situation right now. Part of me is like, this is status quo. This is what they do. The other part of me is maybe there's a reason for it. And I, like you said, I'm in the media, not the Islander side. I'm on the Devil side, but I know a couple people here and there. I've been asking around, and nobody has anything concrete. But there's a feeling that something could be happening because of the silence. some sort of maybe front office change, whatever that
Again,
looks
so
like.
that's where
So
it's a matter of perspective. Where's the silence where is the silence emanating from? It's a
yeah,
weird sentence to say.
and if you ask me, I would think it's the ownership. I think that they don't want anything, any falsalities, if you will, out there until they know what they're doing, right? There are going to be lots of changes within the Metropolitan Division. Actually, breaking news out as of right now, the Flyers have hired a president of hockey operations. It's Keith Jones. So they're making their moves.
Well,
Um,
it's interesting too. Now I'm kind of remembering Lamoriello signed Fashing already, and that was after the season. And he
Correct. Now
signed Maggio.
I do want to point out those contracts were signed before they were announced, like weeks before they were announced. So I don't think that there was I don't think there's a correlation there.
Interesting. So they were going to announce it when the season ended,
Yes, it was
whether that
done.
was in the middle of May or okay.
Yeah, it was done. They just waited to announce it. So um I don't think there's a correlation there. And um that this is where you know Lamorello's, I guess, MO makes you think, like, is this typical Lou, or is his contract up and ownership wants to take their time and figure out the best course of action for them moving forward? Because last season was what it was. Lamorello parted ways with Barry Trotz, lots of question marks there, in favor of Lane Lambert, who was, had his good and bad moments this season. First round exit, didn't get as much maybe postseason in UBS Arena as they wanted. Maybe they didn't necessarily love the moves that Lamorello made, right? Maybe they didn't necessarily love the Bo Horvat deal. Maybe they didn't necessarily love the roster
Well, they
construction last summer. So
the
maybe they're
Horvat deal they have to
wondering.
sign off on, right?
I don't think so, honestly. I think it depends on ownership, right? Some owners might want to be more hands-on, but if you've listened to, and this could just be the way he speaks to the media, but if you listen to Ledecky, most of the time he says, "Look, we're hands off. We hired Lou because we trust him, and he does what he's going to do what he's going to do, and we're hands off
There's
with it.
got to be
He's
a
going to."
limit. That
You
kind of
could be
thing
right.
or a Barzell deal, even it again, Lamoriello likes his power, and I believe he said before, I think it's been written about that when he goes in, he says, this is my team. I'm doing what I think is right for the team." 8-year contracts for tens of millions of dollars is a little bit different. I imagine there's I mean, I imagine who knows. If it were me, at least as the owner, I would say, hey, everything up to this point, everything up to this dollar amount or year amount, you're good. Do whatever you want. But anything beyond that, we got to have a conversation.
And you could be
Maybe
right,
that's not
but
the
look,
relationship.
you got to think about it too. When the Islanders acquired Bo Horvat, his numbers were fantastic. So I could see, if that is the case, that Lamorello needed to get it signed off on, he can turn around to the ownership and be like, "Well, look, he's scoring at a 52 goal clip over an 82 game season." Now he didn't end up there, but that's what he was scoring at, the pace he was scoring at when they acquired him, and
Oh, at the
they're
time of the trade, this was great. I don't think
yeah,
anyone
right,
would
and
argue that.
that's
It's
what I'm saying. So
revisionist to go back and say that it wasn't a good deal. We know that now.
well,
It was a
I
good
don't
deal at
think
the
we know
time.
that yet. That's I
Well,
think that's putting the cart
whether
before
or
the
not it's a good
horse.
deal, I mean, you could be upset about it so far.
That's more accurate. I think there's plenty of time for this to shake out and for us to know, before we talk about good deal, bad deal. But the fact of the matter is that the owners, just because they're the owners, doesn't mean that they're necessarily hockey people, right? Do you think John Ledecky knows what expected goals is? Like, he's not looking at
Well,
that shit. So,
yeah, and teams are also using different stats than that. They're not using the
right,
same analytics that we are, which is,
right.
yeah. they're just I don't know what those things are, but I've heard enough that that's not what the teams are actually using. So we're using things that are likely a little behind in one way, shape, or another.
Yeah. Let's play a little game. All right, we're gonna play a game called Who Stays, Who Goes, and I'm gonna name a player, and you're gonna tell me if they stay or if they go, and you're gonna give me a short synopsis on why. All right, we're gonna start off with in net Semyon Varlamov. Does he stay? Does he go? Why?
I think he stays. I think it's a cheap deal, and they know what the Islanders know what they have in him, and he wants to be there. So I think that pretty much sums it up. They've shown that Sorokin doesn't need to have that tandem aspect to the game. I don't know that that's the right move. I think it's good that he's hungry, but maybe if they don't keep Varlamov, it's because they want to split up that time a little bit more. They did try it this year. Varlamov played a little bit better than last season. Sorokin was still out of this world good. But maybe if he plays 5 less games, is he focused more in the playoffs? This is a little test case, right? He had 2 full seasons. This was his first that they had a playoff run. He had to play out of his mind to get in, get the Islanders in. He was a big reason why they finally were able to figure it out. A lot of players were. Um, but if the only reason why Varlamov won't be back is because they think they need somebody to play a few more games.
I'm gonna agree with you. I think he stays, and I think it's just because of most of the reasons that you just said. In addition to the fact that I think he's just generally happy here. I think he's happy with his deployment. He's a little bit older now. I think he's a little bit more fresh for the games he does start. But I also think it's about the friendships, and I don't mean that as a joke. Oh, the friendships made along the way. No, I mean that as in Alexander Romanov and especially Ilya Sorokin. He's got his countrymen here who he has built these bonds with and these friendships with. And he just, we spoke about this last week, glowing reviews about Ilya Sorokin and the friendship between those two guys. So I don't think he wants to leave that. And the final point here for me is, and I don't know if this is something he's taking into consideration. It's kind of something I'm just talking myself into right now. But New York is a destination where a lot of Russian players want to come play, and so he probably knows in the back of his mind that there could be more people coming from his homeland that might be intriguing to him. So that's what I think. Next up, Zach Parise.
Absolutely. I don't see why not. Um, Pay him. Yeah, if he can come in at league min again, that's great. The Islanders don't have a ton of space. I want to give him a raise because he deserves it. He doesn't need the money, but I don't know how you show your appreciation for a guy like that other than paying him. He's great. He's kind of filled in everywhere up and down the lineup. It hasn't worked everywhere, especially in the top 6. Even though he's scoring goals, it's just a matter of chemistry. But in the bottom 6, he's finding his place. Rather, he has solidified his place in with the Islanders. And if they can find a role for him, and he's played every game, right? He looks fine out there. I think as we discussed last week, a Parise Zizekas fashing 4th line would be fantastic. A player like Durando can come in the bottom 6 after Parise does retire, whether that's after this season or even another one, depending on how next season goes. Islanders seem to have some bottom 6 folks that they can plug in. And they're not in abundance throughout the NHL. I think it's hard to find the ones that are going to fit on your team, but it's not impossible. They found fashing. They can continue to kind of do that. And Parise is a great fit in the bottom 6. I can't think of a reason not to have him.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think he does stay. I don't think he's ready to retire. I think he's got more left in the tank. Um, and I don't see any reason why he won't just sign the same deal again. He's going to be making $833,000 for the next 6 seasons via the Minnesota Wild. So he's making his money in addition to his Islander salary. He could sign the same deal and be living very comfortably. Next up, Scott Mayfield. Does he stay? Does he go?
I believe this is a reversal from last week, and certainly a reversal from what I've thought in the past. I say Scott Mayfield goes. Um, I think he'll be too expensive. I think at some point they need to kind of move on from some of these core players, and this is just an opportunity. He's been around the team a long time. It's going to sting, I think, for the team and for what we know he can be capable of. I think there's a lot of mistakes. They need to make room for a more agile defense group. You have a Pelech and a Pulak for the most part, and a Romanov. He's a bit of a redundant player at this point, and he's 30, 31 years old. Romanov's young. You already have an aging pair in Pulak and Pelech. You have Dobson. You have Aho that can be in the mix. I'm not 100% sold on him, frankly, or Romanov. They need to be able to give themselves some room here. They do have a redundancy in the form of Grant Hutton as well. I don't think it's 1-to-1, but if you're looking for just a bigger right-handed defender to play on your third pair or act as your seventh defenseman, even if he's playing in Bridgeport most of the time, I think you have that, and it's much cheaper. He's already signed. So I think you save yourself the money, and we'll talk about the offseason wish list in a little bit. There are some interesting options out there from just watching this year's playoffs. It has been interesting. There's certainly a player that I would not have suggested at the time, and maybe they're just having a good playoff run. So I'm trying not to get too starry-eyed at some of what they're doing, but and I'll do my best to remember this. I'll make a note here to pay attention later, and I'll give you a clue as to what I'm talking about. I think you let him go. I don't think it's worth having the spot tied up. I don't think it's worth having the money tied up.
Yeah, I was hoping that you were going to say to keep him because I wanted to disagree with you, but I'm going to agree with you again. I do think he does go. I will disagree with you though on why I think he goes. I actually am sold on Alexander Romanov. I think he down the stretch really established himself as the defensive defenseman who can be physical and that can replace the presence of Scott Mayfield. So, and your other point was well stated. They need to become more mobile and agile on the blue line, and that's exactly why I think he goes. I think that Romanov has the mobility. He has the physicality to replace what Mayfield will leave, and the Islanders do need to go out and get some more mobile defensemen for the blue line so that they can play a faster game and push the puck up the ice. So Scott Mayfield does go. I think we're going to agree on this last one. It's Pierre Engvall. Does he stay? Does he go?
I think it starts in earnest that he's staying. That conversation between Engvall, his agent, and the team ultimately start in that way. I want to be here. We want you here. I think the hiccup will be the money. And so I think he fits. I think he's a good player. I was very surprised at how he was able to turn it on. I think there's a certain part of me that will pay him to a point to be on that line with Nelson and Palmieri next season. I don't really know what that line is as far as the payment. So that I'm not sure the Islanders can afford him. So this is a different conversation whether I know whether or not I want him on the team. I don't think Mayfield belongs on the team anymore. They need to part ways with him. The Islanders should keep Engvall. I don't know if they'll be able to. So I'm going to say he goes simply on the dollars and cents. I think he'll get signed somewhere and you'll see the number and go, oh, even if the Islanders were able to get $1.5 million off of that, that's too rich for me. And he's not an old player, right? He
No,
if he
he's
can do
26.
this, this is just who he is as a player. Maybe he's worth it. I just don't know what that number is. And I can't really start to guess because I don't want to say he's been underpaid, but he hasn't been getting paid a whole lot. And he had a heck of an end of that season and a playoff to kind of get a little bit of a raise here. So it really depends on what the rest of the plans are and moving some players around. I'm going to say no simply in the dollars and cents of it all.
That's an interesting take. I agree with the fact that he might cost them a little bit more than they can afford. I think ultimately they figure it out though, because I think that both sides are happy. Like you said, He wants to be there, and the Islanders want to keep him. So, he didn't have this opportunity in Toronto, and who knows, maybe he signs a 1-year deal to maybe establish, look, what I did at the end of the, after you acquired me was legit. I could do it for a full season. Because I think about it, how many teams are going to go out and pay a Pierre Engvall, let's just say it's $4 million a year for 4 or 5 years after what 20 games with the Islanders, and then
I
and
mean,
then the
teams have done dumber shit than that. You know that.
I guess that's true. But I think that he still has a little bit to prove. Not a lot. I think he has a little bit to prove. Um, but the Islanders need his mobility. He's agile. He's a good skater. I'm just not sold yet on if he's a top six forward. I think he's a really good player. I think he could, you know, be a middle six guy. He could float between the second and third line. Um, but I
I don't care
feel
what you
I
call the
fear
Nelson Palmieri Engvall line, right? Second, third,
no,
eighth.
yeah,
That line is good, and that was good for the Islanders. That's what I care about. I don't care about what you call him. Where is in the
yeah.
lineup? Top six, middle six,
No, no, I'm
whatever.
I'm with you. I'm just saying in terms of like you said, dollars, how much it's going to cost. I'm I'm uh, I'm leery of paying him like a second liner because I don't know if he is. He could be. I'm not saying he's not. I just don't know if we
I'm
have
weary of
seen
just.
enough.
I'm weary of any 5x5, 4x5 contract at this point.
Right. That's what I mean. I think
Literally
that
just in general, like anyone that comes in, even if it's a player we like, I'm gonna be nervous about it because it just you're just
yes.
further locking down something that's been unproven. And that's kind of what I said last week. This year was the year to prove that the two pandemic years were not a fluke and don't deserve an asterisk, and they
Yeah.
didn't do that. And
Yeah, no,
so
you're
now
right.
they're starting from they're not starting from this place where they've earned this respect, I think, from the fans and this goodwill rather. Um, they're kind of starting over a little bit. The way that they handled that series and the mistakes and a lot of the stuff and the way that the season went um, was really indicative of how they ended the other seasons, even though the regular seasons, even though they went far on those runs. Um, yeah, they have a lot of good. They have goodwill left to earn with this fan base again. They're starting from a lower point, so they need to kind of figure some stuff out. And this core is the question. So locking anybody up for too long is scary as shit to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, I do think he ultimately does come back. I just think that, like you said, if it's too much and for too long, that's when they'll part ways. But I'm more optimistic that he'll return on for the right number. I guess we'll see who's in charge to make that call. But
Two by
um,
3.5. I'm here for that. Do it.
yeah, because
Even
you
three
know
by 3.5. Get fine.
what was he?
He'll still be 29 going on 30. That's totally
Yeah,
fine.
okay. So you said 2 by 3.5, right? That's $1 million upgrade from what he's making. $1.25 million
Yeah.
upgrade from what he's
Even
making now. So
3 by 3.5. That
sure.
I feel better about that because Martin and Clutterbuck come off the books. Um, Bailey, one way or another, comes off the books next season. So like, if this season is a disaster, there's a space for him in the on the third line or something like that, where
Martin and
Parise might not
Clutterbuck
come back
don't come off the books yet.
next season, after next season.
Oh,
So
okay.
even if they sign Engvall this year and the season is a disaster, and Bailey can't get offloaded and any of that kind of stuff, Bailey, Bailey, Martin, Clutterbuck all come off the books. It gives them the room that they really need for a Sorokin deal. Um, I don't think Dobson yet. That might be 2 years away.
That
Um,
is 2 years away. Yes, he's got next season and the year after locked up.
um, so Engvall will have a place, in other words, in the bottom six.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't work out where he's a middle six player, as you're saying, 3 by 3.5 won't look so bad for a short period of time. I, I'm I have time for that.
Yeah.
So I think if that's where it ends up and everyone's happy with that, then I definitely think he stays. My anticipation is it may just be more money than that, in which case we're gonna wish he didn't stay unless he
Right.
really lights it up.
Well, yeah,
But there's a
that's what you
conversation for in season in beginning in October.
yeah, and that's what, they'll have to be conscious of when making this decision.